Hello my beautiful co-creators, Lilou here from Arizona, in Sedona, but today with a very amazing lady that is doing quite special work. And right here in this house, I'm with Marsha Adams. Hello.
Hello.
That is a scientist. Nice to meet you too, very much so. Synchronicities has brought us again together through Dr. Larry Dossey and many other people that are really admirative of your work. You're a scientist, you're a biologist, and the founder and president of the International Earthlight Alliance, right?
Very good, yes.
So we're going to speak about electromagnetics and how this is affecting us, how this is affecting the planet, and what is the correlation between the sun and the earthquakes and all of that. There's a lot of things that we don't really understand, and you're a person that get really curious about the unexplainable.
That is true. I suffer from terminal curiosity.
How great.
Yeah.
What originally tickled you to start on this path?
Well, as far as the electromagnetics, I was doing some research at Stanford Medical School, and it was a very, very delicate project where we were looking at chick embryo hearts, which were only like 3 days old. And it was so sensitive, the experiments had to be done in the basement on a big marble slab that was on springs, because the vibrations from the building would interfere with what we were trying to measure. And all of a sudden, the experiments started to not work, and the chemicals that were supposed to stimulate the heart, they weren't stimulating the little hearts anymore. And I had submitted a paper, and I was kind of on the hook to give a paper at the American Heart Association on this work, and all of a sudden when it didn't work, that was pretty traumatic, and I disassembled and reassembled the laboratory, and the only thing that made the results return was just time, and there was no explanation for it. So I got really curious about what was affecting these little delicate hearts, and what do you do about it? And I started thinking about how variable all of our biology is, and what are the causes. We have so many unknown causes for illness, for instance. So I came to the conclusion that we medical and biological people were not accounting for all of the things that are going on in the environment and all of the things that are impacting us. So I got very curious about electric and magnetic fields and how they might influence all kinds of biological processes. So I actually became much more interested in this variability than in the experiments themselves, and I started doing correlations with very large databases against solar activity, which is what really causes the changes in our environment. When we have a flare, you've heard of solar flares, that sends a lot of charged particles towards the Earth that interact with the Earth's magnetic field, and then through a process causes a lot of magnetic activity on Earth. And some of those, the vibrations or the frequencies actually are down in the brainwave frequencies. And so there's a lot of possibility for interaction with biology. But
well, yeah, because I saw that article of you in Science Digest back in October '82.
Oh, yes. You saw that.
You're such a pioneer. You're already right there.
I've been there for a long time. I hate to admit how long. But I was, very intrigued. I started doing these correlations with really large databases, human health and behavior, deaths from various causes, crimes, violent and spontaneous crimes. And what I found was I tried to correlations with our weather, which everybody thinks they're tuned into the weather. But I also included some solar activity variables, and what I found was the correlations were much easier to find with solar activity and stronger than with the weather. That was a big surprise. So I really started getting into it, and looking at these databases and also at some surgical bleeding databases, I found that there were times that showed reactions before earthquakes. And that made me really curious. And I was working at a medical clinic at the time. And I said we had the meetings called in-services. And I said, gee, do you remember last Thursday when we had some crazy stuff go on? Did you notice that crazy stuff just was about 3 days before a local earthquake? This is in California where there are lots of earthquakes. And the nurses said, oh, well, that's not all that happened. That patients were reacting to the anesthetic, the doctors were dropping instruments. It was one of those, one of those days. And so I said, wow, that's really interesting. Tell me if it happens again. They say, well, yeah, we can forecast earthquakes. So they actually came to me the next time that it was one of those days, and sure enough, it was followed by earthquakes. So that got me thinking about animals and how the Chinese have actually forecast some earthquakes based on animal behavior, and humans are talking animals. We can describe what we're feeling a little bit better than your dog wagging its tail. So that kind of is how I got launched into looking at the whole array of earthquakes and how electric and magnetic fields affect us both behaviorally and physiologically.
And then then you bump into those Earthlights as you were progressing. How did that tie in?
Well, that's another long story. I became very interested in how we interact as biological beings and spiritual beings to various places on Earth. And because not all places are the same, they're measurably different. And so I had been going around with instrumentation and monitoring sacred sites, Native American sacred sites, standing stones in Scotland, just
Stone
a variety. I've been there, but I did not have the opportunity to take measurements there.
Crop circles?
Crop circles, yes. My results, though, were negative with the crop circles.
Interesting.
Yes, I find that there are a lot of people taking so-called measurements that really don't know how to handle the instruments. They don't know what their instruments mean, and there's a lot of artifacts that they're reporting as real. And there was.
So how do you measure? We need to get into that too.
Oh, okay.
What is how you get to measure?
Yes.
Compared to other scientists.
Oh, okay. The instruments that I have are very high quality, very sensitive instruments, and there are a lot of things out there on the market which are just kind of maybe that much above toy, and they're not very sensitive. And to really get the picture of what the Earth is doing, you need a lot of sensitivity, and unfortunately sensitivity means expensive. So it's not something that you can just do as a hobby for the most part, but as far as magnetic fields go, which is a big thing with crop circle, I actually in the crop circle saw one person with one of these toys and a big iron belt buckle, and he was saying, oh, look at the needle jump, look at the needle jump. He was measuring his belt buckle. And I saw a lot of things like that. But when we set up our instruments, we put a probe at least 50 feet away, maybe 100 feet away, because if anybody gets within 50 feet of it, it'll pick it up. It's that sensitive. And so we had to a lot of time go at night when there weren't a lot of people around, or we had to put like the police ribbon around in order to take our measurements. And so we take magnetic fields and ionizing radiation measurements, and all of this is recorded on computers. This isn't just a one thing and oh wow, I saw that. It's all recorded on computers. We take electric fields, weather, humidity, barometric pressure, just everything we can think of. And so that's basically, and we take a lot of pictures too.
And then as you were doing that, then you saw that on some places around the world there's those lights that
Well, what happened is I had all of this collection of instruments that I was interested in, and a friend and colleague of mine, John Durr, who's head of seismology at the U.S. Geological Survey, kept saying, Marsha, you ought to get interested in Earthlights. You've got all the equipment to go out there and measure these places. And I said, oh, no, that's boring. I don't want to do that. And so he kept pestering me for a couple of years, I think it took. And so finally...
When was that?
Oh, let's see, about 10 years ago.
Okay.
And so he was very persistent. And so I went to Marfa, Texas, which is a very famous Earthlight site. And it took some of the instrumentation, and when I saw an Earthlight, I was hooked. And they look like stars on the ground if you're far away from them, which you usually are. And the Earthlights were thought to be superstition and lore because the accounts of them go back hundreds of years in Aboriginal cultures all over the world. And because they weren't scientists and they didn't know how to interpret these balls of light that just suddenly appeared over the ground, they thought, well, these are spirits of our ancestors, or they are, you know, I guess in Marfa, Texas, they believe it's an Indian chief who was lost in battle trying to lead his braves onward. And so people just had written them off as that, or St. Elmo's fire even, which is a glow that happens around power lines. Until high-speed film was developed and digital photography, sensitive digital photography, were actually able to document the existence of these things, that they weren't people's imagination, that they were real, and that they were measurable. And so I have...
And we're not talking UFOs here.
No, thank you for clarifying that. Some people who have seen them misinterpret them as being UFOs, little green men or what have you, because the misinterpretations continue. But they are a real, physical, measurable, photographable phenomenon. And they're interesting for two reasons. One is that if something around the ground can make the air glow, there must be a huge energy source somewhere around there under the ground. And can we tap that as an alternative energy source? The other reason that they're very important is that these lights appear before earthquakes. And there are reports of that all over the world, starting maybe about a year in advance of that. This is a big earthquake, a large magnitude earthquake. And for a radius of, quite 50, maybe even 100 miles, people are seeing these lights. They are reporting them as UFOs because they don't know the difference. They don't know what they're seeing, and most people have never heard of Earthlights. So that's why it's important to study them. So I've been all over the world trying to track down these lights. I've spent 4 seasons in Norway up at the Arctic Circle in the Hessdalen Valley with a colleague, Erling Strand, who is one of the premier researchers in the field. And Marfa,
so they appear
Texas.
mainly there and in Texas? Because on your site I saw a lot of pictures and in your photo gallery, there's a lot of them coming from there. Or is that just because you particularly focus on that area?
I think some of the best pictures have come from Norway.
Because do they appear at the same place that the earthquake is going to take place, or?
They appear around the area, and I'm not quite sure how close to the epicenter, but they occur within a radius of many miles around the area. And
that is incredible. How does the scientific world react to this?
I think with curiosity. Erling had a conference in Norway, and he invited a lot of prestigious scientists, some Nobel Prize candidates, and they came, and they were all very, very curious. One person is a physicist at the Stanford Linear Accelerator. There are a lot of very good, well-known scientists that are very curious about the phenomenon. But a lot of people are kind of mix them up with UFOs and lore still, unfortunately. But when we are able to acquire more data, write more papers, people will learn about them.
So what does that open up for all of us as human beings on this planet?
Well,
to know that they are there and they're measurable?
Yes. I think we need to appreciate the Earth more and understand that there are so many things that we don't know about the planet that we're living on. And there's a whole quest out there, a whole huge amount of information that we just are ignorant about because we're so closed in with our little lives and making money, and we need to open up our vision and look around and appreciate the Earth more and how we actually relate to it. We were, we are part of this planet. We're all star stuff that came, from outer space, so to speak.
You're clear about that?
I think so.
Yeah. No, this is great to hear a scientist say that.
Oh, well, I'm a very open-minded scientist. But, it makes sense that we resonate with, we're made of the same materials as the planet that we live on, and that we do resonate, and that we are affected by it. And I think one of the, maybe a paper that you'd find interesting that I did was on the remote viewing project. I wrote a paper on how people's ability to remote view, to perceive things at a distance, is actually influenced by the activity of the Earth's magnetic field. And that on days that it's disturbed, so are the viewers, and they don't get, but there's a little bit of a time lag.
So how is the energy of the planet right now? How was it before, like 10 years ago, and now? How do you see the correlation with all? Because a lot of people say there's a lot of energy coming down on the planet.
Yes.
Is that true? Are we seeing it? Are we measuring it?
That's very difficult to say. The measurements that I've taken recently, this is the first time that I've actually run an observatory that is constantly taking data, so I don't have anything to compare it with other than I'd gone on many expeditions and measured sacred sites and things like that, but they were just little snippets in time and not the continuous. So I can say in Sedona, now Sedona's a weird place. It's a very anomalous place.
I want to hear about that too.
Okay. I'm willing to talk. Tell all.
Oh, yeah.
But there are volleys of magnetic pulses that come through. And it's very, very interesting because it's extremely localized. And there's a certain kind of signal that I've been seeing at sacred places, a magnetic signal, at sacred places all over, up at Monument Valley, in Hessdalen, Norway, in England. There's a very characteristic signal that I see fairly frequently here in Sedona. And exactly what it is, I've talked to physicists and electrical engineers, and nobody has been able to really explain what's going on. So that's another quest. But
the truth is that we're being impacted by that.
We are. I can't really say about that right now. We're just coming into an increase in the solar cycle, and we have been in an exceptionally quiet part of the solar cycle for about 4 years. In fact, this has been the quietest solar cycle in maybe 100 years, maybe more. And whenever there's a little flare, things get we respond to change much more than just volume. We respond to changes in the volume more. And so when we're down at the low part of the sunspot cycle, where there aren't very many flares or there's nothing going on and not very many sunspots, when there's a sunspot, oh my gosh, we notice a big change. And I just can't say really about the total energy coming in. Actually, there's been less, but it could be that people are responding to changes more. I don't know.
As we're becoming more sensitive to it. But certainly there's more and more, as you say, computers, more and more things coming in the picture as well.
Yes, yes. That is a very good point, that we may actually be increasing our own sensitivity through the use of electronics. Electronics have just blossomed in the last 10, 15 years.
It's a very positive word.
Yes. I guess that's a manufacturer's word. But we are bathing ourselves in electrosmog.
Yeah.
Our computers, our cell phones, all of the cell phone towers around, people who carry cell phones on their body. We are the electrical wiring in our houses. We are just being bombarded more and more and more. And these Wi-Fi systems that are coming up, and they're talking about building bigger and better Wi-Fi. And we are just in a electromagnetic soup.
Yeah.
And that can make people irritable, and we are electrical beings by nature. And our cells run on electricity, our nerves run on electricity. How could all of this electrosmog not interfere with our own biological processes and affect us mentally and affect our health? And I think it's very important to minimize your exposure. And we love our gadgets, I love,
we become
I love my
addicted
cell
to
phone.
it, yeah.
Yes, we do. But I think it's very prudent to just eliminate or minimize our exposures.
Do you have other recommendations to be careful actually in our own home, or things that you would recommend?
If you have a Wi-Fi system in your house, you can put it on a timer so that it goes off at night. And don't put it any place that's near your bedroom. Keep it as far away from the place that you spend time as possible. Those little electric transformers that we are addicted to, and I call them vampires, the little black boxes with fangs that go into the wall, they emit a pretty strong magnetic field. And magnetic fields are actually more biologically active than electromagnetic, because they penetrate right through you, and it's very difficult to shield from these. So you should stay at a minimum of 3 feet away from these, and hopefully 6 feet away from these, because if you're a computer user and really into computers, you'll probably have as many as 10 of these things hooked up to the various devices that go onto your computer, and you can get a very large field going that can actually, I discovered that when it made my legs numb. And I was wondering why, and I went there and measured it, and oh my God. So that's another thing that you can do. Keep your radio phone, you can put that on a timer if you want to, or at least keep the base station far away from you. And don't carry these phones on your body. Put it for women on your, in a purse.
Especially for pregnant women.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Do you even go into predictions into what's going to happen next, regards to solar flares, or?
We are coming on the upswing of the solar cycle now, and myself and many people, scientists, are very concerned about all of our electronics, whether they'll continue to function, because the solar activity can affect satellites. It can actually kill the satellites if there's enough. It also endangers astronauts because it's just a huge amount of radiation. The sun unleashes charged particles that just come blasting towards Earth, and these particles can actually cause magnetic field changes on Earth that can affect our power stations, the satellites, GPS systems, our ability that interferes with radio transmissions. And so we're so dependent on electronics now, our cell phones and everything, that there will be times when these gadgets won't work. And, it brings up questions for national security, all kinds of things. So it's good to have a backup system, to have a landline. And
to have a plan B.
Yeah, to have a plan B.
How do you feel about the earthquake that happened in Japan and what some people are saying about, next catastrophe happening possibly to California?
Yes. Well, I did a study many years ago when I first started looking at electromagnetic fields and earthquakes and how the electromagnetic fields, low frequency, actually affect people. And I did a study that went on for about 10 years, and I looked at various ways to forecast earthquakes. I looked at I actually put together the first low-frequency electromagnetic monitoring station that was civilian back in about the early 80s. And so I was monitoring the low-frequency electromagnetic field, but I was also monitoring people, and I had a study where people called in and reported physiologic symptoms. But there were a few people who had premonitions, psychic premonitions, and there were people who had dreams. And the results of that study, the electromagnetic did pretty well. The people who had physical symptoms like anxiety and depression and irritability. One of the big things that happens before earthquakes is they will have fights with their significant other, and just having that awareness and going through and having a fight, you stop all of a sudden and say, oh, there must be an earthquake coming. But so the people who reported these physical symptoms and that were actually measurable, weight gain was another, because people retain fluids before earthquakes. And so recordable, measurable things, that did very well with forecasting earthquakes. The people who had dreams did very well, but the premonitions were zip. So, I hope that doesn't
interfere with Dr. Larry Doss's work. Yeah.
But so from that experience, I certainly believe that that we all have capabilities that are intuitive, and we can communicate that way if we open our minds to do that. I'm not a disbeliever in that phenomena, but I am saying when people forecast disasters and earthquakes, oftentimes it doesn't work out. And so I don't know how to interpret that. Some people are saying, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
But if you look back...
But you saw it coming, the earthquake in Japan?
Through a different means, something that I'm studying here that is a measurable physical thing. The system that I'm looking at now doesn't particularly locate, it just tells the timing of things. But we did see indications for something very large coming soon. So,
yeah. And I guess there must be so much data around the world from so many countries.
Yes.
Collaborating, I guess, into knowing that these phenomena are happening and when.
After
or is
the
there
fact,
not very?
Not really. People just haven't pieced it together very well. I'll be giving a paper in June on earthquake forecasting and what I've seen here in Arizona and Sedona that might give a big clue for some worldwide effort.
Exciting.
Very simple, very easy, within the scope of anybody to do this. But I'm still analyzing the data and confirming that what I see is real and true.
So this is what you're working on right now, or is there other exciting projects?
Well, that's the main one, and the Geo Pathak Zone project is another one that I'm working on at the same time.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Well, it was such a delight to meet you, and I feel like it's another important piece of the puzzle here, and people need to hear that. We need to be aware and hear this. Thank you so much.
Oh,
Juicy conversation.
Yes, yes. It's been a delight talking to you.
Thank you. Well, much love, my beautiful co-creators. We'll see you.
And this is hooked up to a voltmeter here. And the other side is hooked up to the ground. And so right now, your body is acting like an antenna, and it is picking up all of the electromagnetic fields from the household wiring, from the ground, from all over the place. And so you can see here that you are at about 500 millivolts you're picking up. But as you walk around, if you walk around, you'll see that that changes.
190.
Yeah, 300. And
Wow.
what happens because of the wiring in our houses, there are hot spots in the house and there are cool spots in the house. And a lot of people think that they're sick because they sit down and they read and they can't concentrate. But what they find, or what I find when I go and look at their house, I find that lots of times they're sitting in a hot spot that is affecting, you know, their body and their brain. And so people should become familiar with their environment and find the spots that are not so hot, like where you're standing, as opposed to over here. When you move over here, you can see that it jumps, and this can take place
600.
within a few feet.
Yeah, we're gonna cut.
It's not just an ordinary house. I've made it into a geophysical observatory. And out here is a study of what we call geopathic zones. This is something that the Scottish people and British people are very into with the ley lines. And supposedly there are places that are not good for people to live. And so we're trying to measure this whole area, because there's been a lot of strange things happening in this house that are not explainable. The lore says that ants and cats are attracted to these zones that aren't good for people. And so I went out there and took some flags a couple years ago and stuck them in all the anthills. And sure enough, the anthills formed a straight line. So I've been taking measurements of magnetic fields, electric fields, ionizing radiation. At each one of these stations, there are about 80 flags out there, trying to see if they formed a pattern. And I don't have the research finished, but you can see here at another site that this is looking at ionizing radiation, that there was a ring actually around the area. So there was a very definite pattern. And we're beginning to see something like that. And the silver box out there actually is, it's covered with tinfoil to reflect the hot Arizona sun and protect a very high-tech magnetic probe that's underneath there that's connected to the computer right down there. And that is constantly measuring the Earth's magnetic field and changes in the magnetic field. Most people don't realize that the Earth has two kinds of magnetic field. It has the stationary magnetic field, which is like a bar magnet, but then it changes. On top of the stationary field, there are ripples that is caused by solar activity. And this is measuring the ripples, which are very important when we have a magnetic storm. I think a lot of people have been hearing now with all of our instruments and satellites how vulnerable we are to solar activity, because when the solar wind, the charged particles from solar flares come in, they can cause magnetic fields on the Earth that are capable of disrupting power and killing satellites and all kinds of things, raising havoc. So these are very important measurements. And sometimes just the nature of the ground, underground streams can evidently affect the magnetic activity. The other instrument out there is an electric field measurement, and we're just looking at the constant electric field. Now, this is just a very actually crude instrument that will measure magnetic fields, Gauss meter. And I'm going to show you what happens when you get close to, whoops. Wait a minute, maybe this, let me check the battery, maybe this is not. Okay, yeah. That side of the computer, you can see that it just pegs it. It's more at the back than at the front. And all the computers, the external hard drives are not so bad. You can see they're pretty calm. But these computers and these power supplies, these transformers, when they're plugged in, can put out a very large magnetic field, and it's large enough that it is probably within the biologically active range if you're within maybe 3 feet of it. So, and most people have a lot of gadgets that are attached to their computers, so they'll have many of these, and so that kind of goes together to make a very strong field. And if you work at a computer a lot, then
we're totally out of balance.
It may really throw you out of balance. This is where I do most of my work, and I do a lot of data analysis and photographic analysis. And I mentioned to you about that screen that was off-gassing, which were terrible chemicals. And I just replaced it with this one. This is an LED screen, which is kind of the newest one. And it's very, very good because it has no measurable fields that are coming out of it, or at least magnetic fields. And it is not producing any chemicals. But that other screen that I told you about in this enclosure was emitting so many chemicals that it made my eyes water so badly I couldn't read the screen. And people should be very aware of that and aware of their environment, of how they situate themselves when they're working with computers. And if you noticed, I have now moved all of my computing equipment about 10 to 15 feet away, just because of the aggregation of all of the electric and electromagnetic fields that are coming off of the computers. And it makes a difference. And it makes a difference in your long-term health.
What is that?
A storm glass. And it is something that was invented by the British Navy to forecast weather. It's some crystals that are suspended in an alcohol, and I think it's camphor crystals. And the pattern of the crystals is constantly changing, and supposedly with the weather conditions. And Darwin took one of these on his voyage to the Galapagos Islands to help forecast the weather. So we're watching this just to see how it moves and what it does, and if it correlates with anything else that we're measuring here, the electric and magnetic fields and radiation.
I bet that's a lot of data to correlate.
It is. It keeps me very, very busy.